I've been meaning to paint up this winged lion by Artisan Guild for a long time, and for some reason I have put it off for ages. But in this video, I'm going to paint it up, show you the techniques that I used, and actually I put a little bit more effort into this one than I usually do, so come along and see how it turns out. So this winged lion by Artisan Guild is part of the Requiem Brotherhood, and I've probably butchered the name there, but it's a great set. It's very similar to, I guess, like your Sigmarines and your Age of Sigmar stuff. I think a lot of the sculpts in this set look fantastic, but this winged lion has always drawn my attention. In my head it was going to be much bigger, and that's why I put off printing it, but actually barely took up any resin, very easy to print off, and although it comes in multiple pieces, there was no shrinkage or any issue that I experienced. It was very easy to put together afterwards, and actually really easy to paint and get some pretty good results. So first things first, obviously I got it printed off, put it all together, and then primed it. And I went with my usual traditional black first with a white highlight over the top using my airbrush. So just the standard Zenithal prime, and straight away I really liked what I was seeing already. It helps to capture a lot of those details, brings it all up so you can start working with it a little bit more. I was already very pleased with this and looking forward to painting it. Now I figured I was going to go with the same sort of paint scheme that I used with the old Minotaur Warriors by Artisan Guild beforehand. It's the start of using a Hellion Green, which is a contrast paint over all the armor, and it gives this kind of, it's not green, it's basically a bluey turquoisey green at a push, but it's mostly blue. So Games Workshop, get your naming right. But yeah, it gives this really nice effect straight off, and you need to do relatively little to give it this magical effect. I really like it for big, bulky armor, especially if I'm kind of going for like my good guys army. I think it just looks fantastic. So once you've got all of your armor out of the way, it's moving across onto the lion. And the color I started off with was Zealot Yellow. I am a big fan of this color. I think it looks fantastic. Yellows are notoriously hard to paint. This makes it so much easier. So I went over pretty much all of the lion fur apart from the mane using this Zealot Yellow. Made sure I hit the tops of the wings as well, just to make sure I capture some of that detail. And then once that was done and still wet, I picked out the Fire Giant Orange, and I did all the mane and sort of like these kind of like tassels he's got hanging down as well, and blended it in just a little bit around the tops as well, so that way it kind of transitioned nicely from the yellow to the orange without it being too stark. At this point, you might be looking and going, oh my God, this is crazy. That yellow and the orange really stand out against each other. But later on, when we kind of blend it back down, don't worry, it's not going to stand out as much as that. Once that was done, it was over onto the wings, and I went with pallid bone on all of the feathery areas and stuff like that. It's a nice match. It doesn't go too bright or anything, but it brings it down and it almost matches that Zealot Yellow. And I think it looks pretty good in my opinion, so it's definitely one to be using for this. Doing all the feathers and everything else, at this stage I was really starting to like what I was seeing, and then I went back around and just did some of the detail in terms of like the straps and everything else using hardened leather. It's my go-to when it comes to all your browns, and granted you could go around and mix it up a little bit more, but I just didn't. I wanted to use this pretty much all over. So like the staff of her mace, for example, the winged rider, and all like her dress and cloak and everything, I just went with the same color. It didn't matter to me too much that they weren't going to stand out against each other, because there's enough detail in this model to draw your eye. Moving on to the claws, I went with a Grim Black by Speedpainter. The Grim Black gives a really nice effect. Because I've used that Zenithal highlight underneath it, you start to get some nice contrast there. Even though you're just using one shade of black, it's got some shadows, it's got some highlights. It's already looking pretty good in my opinion on those claws. So for her face and for the lion's face as well, I used Crusader skin. Got all of that over. It's my absolute go-to whenever it comes to skin. I think it looks fantastic. And again, it's a nice blend between like the orange and the yellow. I think it looks really good at this stage. So before we get on to any of the highlighting or anything, let's talk about the base and some of the magical effects that I did here. So for that, it's a really easy job to do. It's literally a case of going back in there, kind of putting any whites down on some of those magical areas that have maybe been spilled over on, like the back of the mace here, for example, or on like the bells. I don't know what they are, like kind of looks like air purifiers or something. And then afterwards, all I did is I hit them with Hive Dweller Purple and also Plasmatic Bolt. So you start at the, I guess, one end with Hive Dweller Purple and the other end with Plasmatic Bolt. Go back in there with your brush and just kind of blend it all in together. It's really easy to do. And I guess one of the pros and cons of Army Painter Speedpaints is they stay wet for quite some time. So it's really nice to be able to work with those. You get a really nice transition from the darker purple through to the lighter Plasmatic Bolt, and then towards the end it becomes more whitish again because you've done that Zenithal highlight at the start. I did exactly the same on the base as well, so with that rock or crystal or whatever it is, it turned into a crystal when I was painting it. Obviously I hit all the lower areas with that Hive Dweller Purple, went back in there with Plasmatic Bolt and did exactly the same as I had done on all of the sort of like magical areas. And at this stage, it was looking pretty good. I then did the spillover onto the base as well, so I kind of put all that purple around the bottom of the crystal and some of the glowy green plasmatic bolt stuff around the outsides of it. And then once that was done on the bottom of the base, I hit it with Gravelord Grey as well, just on the outskirts. That way it looked darker at that stage. Now that all your base layers are done, I went back in with a dry brush. So I literally got a cream dry brush, wiped off most of the paint onto a tissue, and then on the back of my hand as well, so that way it didn't dry it out too much. I just went around that crystal and some magical areas, popped it on that dry brush, and it really blends it in together and gives some of those highlight areas and makes them really pop. I love the way this crystal turned out, and I really like the way the magical effects turned out as well. I did do a little bit more when it comes to highlighting, but we'll get into that in a moment. I used that same cream dry brush pretty much over the rest of the model as well, especially the armor. So the Achelion green looks good already in my opinion, but it's really nice to be able to go back in with a dry brush and bring up some of those high areas because it gives it this sort of like magical tinge all over it. Once you're done with that dry brush, you pretty much do it again, but with plate metal, but only on the metallic areas, obviously. So going back in, it then gives it this more true to life metal area. You don't need to go back in and paint up loads of it, but it just starts to give it that nice shine and an actual metallic sheen to it. Once that was done, I then just hit it with a black oil wash all over, and I didn't really need to take too much off because I'd really thinned down the oil wash this time. Normally I work with a thicker oil wash, but I wanted to really just have it as a, I guess like a panel liner or a traditional wash and not darken it down too much. I went over the whole model and there was something missing, and I spoke to one of my friends about it, and they just pointed out that the rider didn't stand out. At this stage, she had the white hair, she had the Achelion green armor and this like star thing that she's holding, and she just looked like she blended in. The lion stood out, but that was pretty much it. So I wanted to do something different. I wanted to try and give her some kind of glowing effect. And at first I tried oils and I hated it. It looked awful, so I could probably do a bit better in the future. But the great thing about oils is they stay wet for a long time and you can wipe them off. And that's exactly what I did. So I went back in there and I wiped it all off. So at this stage, I went back in there and I used white on that skull. So on the star bit that she's holding, I put loads of white on it. I then went back in with just a standard blood red and I put that over it. I did mix it 50-50 with the Army Painter Speedpaint medium, just so it was a nice thin consistency. And that way it kind of went in around the edges of the star instead. Once I'd done that bit, I needed to get all the glow and everything else and start to kind of put that red glow on the rest of the model. And I haven't really done anything like this before, so it was a lot of trial and error. Fortunately, I think it turned out pretty good. The first thing I did is I used a bit of a red dry brush. So I didn't go into it too much. I barely had any paint on my dry brush, and I hit some of those areas around like the face, the hair, her kind of like shawl that she's wearing, and just the edges of the star as well and all the points. I then decided I wanted to try like using a really thinned down paint. So I actually used the blood red speed paint, some speed paint medium, but also the airbrush white that I use. So I kind of dropped some of that out because it's already pre-thinned. So I figured it wasn't going to add too much color onto it. At this point, you can then mix back and forth. So you can add a bit more red in if you want to, you can add a bit more white in if you want to get some of those areas. And I just tried my best to get like a transition between like I guess the really bright red through to a dark red the further away from that source lighting that there was. Once I'd got all of the reds down and I'd gone back in there and I blended them all together, again, because I was using speed paints and I was also using like an airbrush white, I didn't have to worry too much about it drying out very quickly. So I really enjoyed that process. Afterwards, I just went back in with the pure airbrush white and I used my brush and I just brushed it on. So like the top of that skull, for example, the points of her sort of like star thing. I don't know why I keep calling it a star, it's not a star, but the points of it there, like the high areas around like the top of the forehead, for example, where the hair is, trying to hit some of those just with that pure white and blending it ever so slightly. And then I called it done. Looking at it now, I almost wish there were some areas that were just that little bit more bright, but I figured if I take them too far, it's the first time I've done anything like this, I'm gonna screw it up and ruin the whole thing. So I left it there, because otherwise I was gonna destroy it. I really like it. It's not perfect, but it's pretty easy to do. And I'm pretty impressed with what I managed to do with that. After that was done, the only thing I needed to do then was the eyes. So the eyes, all I did is I went back in there with white, did the eyes, so you had to kind of get a bit of a fine brush, go in there, and then I pretty much did the same as I did with that skull, and I hit it with plasmatic bolts. That is a plasmatic bolt mixed with 50% speed paint medium, and then just dropped it in there. Jobs are good at that point. So before it was done, I wanted to go back in there and get a few more highlights. And I used the same white airbrush paint, which literally I just kind of dropped onto my wet palette, used my brush, and then just went around it and yeah, brought up some of those areas. So around the crystal, for example, the tops of the crystal, some of the edges of the crystal, I just put it on there. It's a nice blend. You don't have to worry about going and ruining it too much because it's not that much of a thick white paint. Some of the tops of like the armor, for example, some areas on like the top of the lion's face, I just went in there and just lightened them up as well. And at that point, I called it done. Again, just like with the weapon and that glow effect, I could have probably gone in and done more, but I was very conscious I would have ruined it. The wings, for example, I did a lot of highlighting on there, using that sort of like airbrush watered down paint. And I like it. I would have liked to have brightened them up a little bit more, but I was getting very close to ruining it, and I could tell that I was starting to get sloppy. I didn't want to ruin it or anything like that, so I left it at that stage. And that's it. That's how you paint up this winged lion. And I've got to say, it's one of my favorite things I've painted. I absolutely adore this sculpt. I think it is a fantastic sculpt by Artisan Guild, so well done to them. This looks absolutely awesome. But B, just because I spent a little bit more time with it. If you've watched the channel for a while, you know I pretty much work with speed paints or contrast paints. I normally do that and then throw an oil wash over it and call it done. But with this, I wanted to spend a little bit more time trying to push my skills forward, experimenting with different things, just to see what I could achieve. And I really, really like how this turned out. So let me know in the comments, do you like this? Or what would you have changed? And again, if you've got any tips for me or for your fellow hobbyists, throw them in the comments below as well, because we're all here to learn. I am by no means an expert, and I am on this journey with you guys trying to figure it all out. I love this. I really, really enjoyed painting it up. This isn't a sponsored video. Artisan Guild didn't send me this over. I paid for it myself. I absolutely love their sculpts. I think they're fantastic. If you're into sort of like wargaming, skirmishing, or anything like that, they have some fantastic models. They've got their own game system as well that you can play, so it's worthwhile checking them out on Patreon or My Mini Factory. Hope you've enjoyed that video. If you have, hit the like and subscribe button because it really helps the channel to grow. And if you're looking to get any of the supplies that I use, I'll try to link them all down in the description below as well. I do get a bit of a kickback from that. It doesn't cost you any extra, it just helps to support the channel. In the meantime, stay safe and I'll see you soon. Bye.